What's good, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the MODG podcast. We're joined by special guest Laurence Holmes from 670 The Score. Grew up listening to this guy, absolute radio legend here. Laurence Holmes has been literally talking one of the best football talk guys there is out there for the Bears. If you'll recognize his voice instantly, you've definitely heard it on the 670 The Score, one of the millions of clips he's been on. Laurence, tell the people where they can find you, even though I already did, and it's an honor to have you, man.
Thanks. I appreciate the invite. People can listen to the Bernstein and Holmes show middays, 10 to 2 on The Score. You can also check out my House of L podcast, which is a lot of fun. And I am often on NBC Sports Chicago and other places on TV too. So that's where you can find me.
Hey, it's an honor to have you, man. We're talking Bears draft. You guys go ahead and say what's up to Laurence, and let's go ahead and get this kicked off. We should have Glynn joining us any minute now as well. He's running a couple minutes late.
Apologies. Typical.
Laurence, I remember you from the when you were hosting the after the postgame show with Alex Brown and Lance Briggs. That year you did that, man. I think that was the year that you drew me in. And I became a big fan of yours when you were handling the post-game show with those guys.
Yeah, I mean, that was I think it ended up being like 5 total seasons of doing that.
Wow.
But one of them was interrupted. One of them was interrupted because of the pandemic. Then there were the layoffs. Then I came back. Then I was doing football night in Chicago. So it was very cool. Like last week, I got to do the draft show with Alex and Lance, and it was like putting on an old shoe, man. Like we had a blast. Those guys are great, whether it was Alex and Lance or Alex, Lance, Matt, Olin, who else? Coach Wanstead. Like it's been a lot of fun to be able to do that show. Like it's like going to grad school if you're someone who loves football. You get a chance to learn it from guys that I always say that I'm pretty good. Like I can call out, like I can diagnose what happened on a play, I would say faster than most. Seeing those guys be able to do it at the snap, like to know that a play is going to fail or succeed when the ball is snapped, and watching Olin be able to be like, oh yeah, without us having to rewind the tape on something and go, oh, the guard didn't crash down. That was his assignment. That's why the whole play blew up. Wow. And then you go back and you'll hear an analyst go, well, you see here, the guard didn't block down. That's why the whole play blew up. And you just kind of look over at Olin and you're like, oh, see, that's how, when you're in it and of it, your brain moves a lot faster than everyone else.
And while Samo, he got on to you recently while you were talking with Alex Brown and them, I started listening to you back when Alex Brown and them were playing back in probably the heyday of, for the people who aren't old enough to be around for the 85 Bears, the 2005, 2006 seasons, right around there. That's probably the heyday of being a Bears fan for me. And Laurence was on the night crew back then. I believe that was around the time you had a night show with Jason Goff. I don't know if you remember that far back, but I know you were on.
No, Jay and I never had a show together.
Never had a show. You guys had shows back to back is what it was.
Yeah, like I think I did 6 to 10 and Jay did 10 to midnight.
Yeah.
But I was also covering the team every day. So I was going from Hallis Hall to the Score Studios at night, like every day. And that was, quite the grind because, I don't know if you guys have been up to Lake Forest, but it's really far, especially with traffic. Going up there wasn't too bad. Like Lovey was great about his schedule was really conducive to getting up there with no problem. It was the getting out. Like you had a choice to make. And the choice was either you left as soon as press conferences ended and you got home and then went over your stuff, or I had like a 5:00 Bears hit that I would do with Boers and Bernstein back then. And you had to go home then, because if you stayed even in a half an hour, like let's say it's a difference between leaving at 2:45 and leaving at 3:15. If you leave at 3:15, you're not getting home until about 6. Like that was a real, it is a real grind to get up there. Like that game day was always my payback day on people who were on the beat, because all those folks like lived up north, and then on game day I'm at Soldier Field in 4 minutes from my house. But during the week it was treacherous, especially when you get into November, December, January, and you got to find all sorts of alternate routes or just decide to stay at Hallis Hall until 7 or 8 o'clock before you would go home.
Man, the grind. Hey, but it's worth it. I know you've enjoyed it. You got to love doing what you do. You're a guy that's the voice of Chicago at times, very recognizable voice, and we appreciate you for it all the years of covering this team.
Oh, thanks. What do you guys want to talk about?
The draft, man. I think we're focused on the draft and what you think this team's going to look like this year. I think everyone's talked about Caleb Williams, but we might as well go ahead and start there. What are your thoughts on Caleb Williams and what he's going to bring to this team? And we'll welcome Glynn in here if you want to give him a hard time for being late.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This guy.
Slack.
You're lucky. The guy saved your ass, because like
I stuck up for you, Glynn.
If they weren't good dudes, I would have bounced.
Fashionably late.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's better late than never, Glenn, right?
Is that a White Sox jersey, Glenn? Please tell me no.
Sox jersey.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, man.
Hey, sticking
Yeah,
it out.
Southside stand up.
When you sweep,
I'm from the South Side too. I'm a
when
North
you
Side
sweep, I at least got to give you a little play. They got one sweep this year. I got to give them a little play. Laurence, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thanks for being patient as well, guys. Thanks for holding me up. And I was listening a little bit earlier. Swifty tell you he's been watching you since he was like 3? I'm just joking.
I mean, it's May 8th will be my 26th anniversary at the Score.
Oh man.
Wow. Really? That long? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Congratulations.
walked in there right after college.
Wow.
So year 27 starts May 9th.
I was listening at least 20 years ago. Probably a little longer than that.
Yeah, that's always the scary part when people are like, I grew up listening to you. And I'm like, I'm not even 50. But it makes sense when you think about it. You know, I've basically been on the air for, God, I want to say like 23 years out of the 26 I've been on the air. So it's always weird when I hear people be like, oh, I used to listen to you when you were doing the Me and Z show and the wrestling show with Hood. And I'm like, man, that was a really long time ago. Yeah, here we are. So anyway, what were we talking about? Caleb?
Caleb Williams. Let's start it off with Caleb.
I mean, it wasn't a surprise, right? We've all been getting ready for this for basically 2 years, that Caleb Williams was going to be the number 1 pick after the fleecing of the Carolina Panthers happened by Ryan Poles. I'm excited to see what he does. I do think that he has some of the same issues that Justin Fields has, and it's in a smaller package. So I wonder how that's going to work. But there are some people who believe that his arm talent is so above and beyond, and his anticipation, the anticipatory throws, his presence inside the pocket is going to make up for any of the things that he might not do as well as people hope. So what's really cool about it, and we were talking about it before we went live, it feels like the Bears are actually doing this the right way. You could argue about, well, they needed to hire an offensive coach. I'm a firm believer that offensive coach and head coach are not synonyms. There's a different skill set that one needs to be a head coach. And it's not just, oh, well, he's got a whole bunch of plays and your quarterback's your most important person. Quarterback may be the most important person. He's not the only person. And if your head coach isn't a leader, it doesn't matter if he can draw up plays. That's just my opinion, though. Other people feel differently. So I do like that the Bears are at least approaching this like they're not messing around, that they want to try and do everything that they can to have Caleb succeed. And it's something that we haven't seen with quarterbacks of recent vintage, not just Justin, but Mitch too. Like there were things that were missing from their developmental arc that didn't allow them to be the best player that they could be. Now, Mitch probably does max out as a backup. And that's on Ryan Pace for not doing all the due diligence that he should have done during the draft. I think Justin's a good starter in this league, and we'll see if Pittsburgh is not dumb enough to put him on punt return. We'll see if that ends up being the case.
Not saying Justin can't be a good punt returner. We actually saw it in Indy last year in the little scrimmages they did the week of practice. Justin was catching punts and stuff, but
there was a video with Flus talking about it. Yeah, Eberflus even talked about it. He was like, man, you know, if we were ever to put Justin back there for a punt, he'd probably take one to the house. So I get it.
He has the skill set. He has the skill set, yes.
No.
But if he's your backup quarterback, maybe it's worth it. Like if Russ was the starter and Justin wanted to do it, that would be the preface there. Justin would have to want to do it and volunteer to do it to get on the field. Because I'm not going to ask a guy who, like Laurence said, can be a starting quarterback in the NFL to go out there and return punts. That's crazy.
His name ain't Taysom Hill.
If I'm his agent, right? If I'm his agent, no way. Because here's the problem with Taysom Hill: does anybody out here look at him like a quarterback? Not at all.
No, they look at him as
Justin
a
does that.
knife.
Right. If Justin were to do that, all of a sudden him being a quarterback is thrown out the window. And now he didn't work too hard, struggled and strived too far in his career to be regulated and as a return specialist. Now, I don't want to see that happening. But here's a question I have for you, though, Laurence. And I was just thinking about it earlier. We talked so much about Caleb and his relationship with his teammates going forward, and there's been so much talked about in terms of his relationship with his past teammates in college, be it at Oklahoma or at USC. As important as those relationships are and going forward need to be, how important do you see his relationship with offensive coordinator, and how much of an emphasis do we need to really start placing it on how those two gel?
When they hired Shane Waldron, I thought it was a really interesting choice from a personality standpoint, because everything that I've been told about Shane Waldron is that he is subdued. I love the picture of him with Cliff Kingsbury at Caleb's Pro Day, because it's like, here's Mr. Hollywood, Cliff Kingsbury, and there's Shane Waldron looking like someone's insurance salesman, like just kind of hanging out. And I actually think that it's the right vibe. I think that the quarterback is going to take up a lot of oxygen. He's got a personality. Your coordinator doesn't need to have one. Caleb's got enough personality for everybody. So why not have a dude that's kind of okay being in the background, that seems, from what his resume is and the work that he did in Seattle, seems like he's focused on ball and that he's flexible, which is another thing that we haven't really seen from the offensive masterminds over the last decade with the Bears. There's a lot of rigidity in what Matt Nagy wanted to do. There's a lot of rigidity in what Luke Getsy wanted to do. And even just hearing people describe what Shane Waldron thinks of offense, like, it gives me a lot of hope that he understands, well, if Caleb's got special talent, I don't need to be like, oh, well, this is our system and we just run our system no matter what. No, take the guy that's super talented and say, hey, what are you like doing? How can we accentuate, like, this is what we're doing, like, out of a base, but we want to accentuate what it is that you do well, and then give him the opportunity to do that. That gets me excited that overall the Bears as a franchise have figured some stuff out that seems like a Ryan Poles directive, and that to me is hope. As far as the teammate thing goes, I've talked a little bit about this on Football Night and a lot on The Score. Here's how I don't know Caleb at all. I've had to really filter what people have said to me, like people I know around the NFL, because I feel like some of it is a little bit of dog whistle. Like, there's some stuff that I don't like that people have thrown into my inbox, and I haven't given it oxygen because I don't think that it's fair. What I think is cool, though, and this is just me speculating because I don't know the dude. He didn't have to go do the pro day at USC. He didn't have to. Everyone knew he was going to be the number one pick. There's no doubt that he was going to be picked number one. And if it wasn't going to be number one by the Bears, it was going to be number one by Washington. So he knew that he was going to be number one. That says to me that he's a great teammate, because if he goes out there on pro day and let's say you're Brendan Rice, who I thought would be drafted higher, maybe he doesn't get drafted at all if Caleb Williams isn't out there throwing to him on pro day. Those are the types of things that
right.
he didn't need a showcase. His showcase was on tape. For him to go out there and try to make everyone else better, I think that bodes well for hopefully what his relationship will be like inside that locker room.
He also didn't try to steal the show at that USC Pro Day, which was also eye-opening for me. That's what I noticed immediately. Like, we didn't see any razzle-dazzle. It was all, just basic quarterback play, the basic dropbacks. And, I thought that he was just being a great teammate in that instance and just, allowing his teammates to shine and get their opportunity to shine, because he knew he was going to draw the crowd in, but he wanted to make sure that the showcase and the show was really about, the pro day was really about those guys as opposed to it all being about him. Now,
I think part of that was calculated though too. He wanted to show that he's not just the let's make super fantastic plays outside of the pocket off script. He wanted to show that I can work in the structure of offense. This is me just coming in here and showing you that I can drop back and work from within the pocket, because he did do that at USC and he talked about that himself. It's not something that's talked about by the national media as much. They only talk about his highlight plays.
All right, who's got the dog and what kind of dog is it?
There you go, Will. Will, you let the dogs out, bro?
Hey, they said, man, you got Laurence on the show tonight. We got to come get some of this excitement.
What kind of dogs you got? Oh, okay, cool. What are their names?
They are Miata and Coco.
Okay.
Nice.
And Coco, obviously an all-white dog, right? Like just.
No, actually, she's black and brown.
I know that was the joke. What is wrong with y'all?
Hey, there's always something wrong with Will. That's the question for another day. Oh man. All right, we'll get back.
So, do you think we addressed enough of the? Do you think we addressed enough of the depth issue on this team, particularly at the edge position?
No, I mean, I still have two areas of concern, and unfortunately, they're very important areas of concern. I think that it's been unfair to Matt Eberflus that his whole time here, he has not been gifted an ass-kicking 3 technique.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it's a very unfair thing for a coach who's running this particular defense to not have. Now, maybe they feel like Dexter made a jump in the second half of the season, and the statistics would bear that out, that he seemed to get it, but it seemed like they are trying to fit, a 2-gapper into a 1-gap system. Mm-hmm. And we'll see if it works. He does seem to have the athleticism. And while that defense got decent on its own, you saw how good it could be once Montez Sweat was here. And if you were to give him another outside weapon that you could rely on, who knows the type of havoc that they could cause. I remember having conversations with Bears players, like you guys were talking about the recent glory days of the Bears. And it's the idea of being able to break on the ball. If you look at the seasons that Charles Tillman and Tim Jennings had at cornerback, where they're making plays, or even we could even say Eddie even in 2018.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that he had success is because he knows that the quarterback, the ball has to come out because there's pressure. That if there's some sort of double move, it's too late. quarterback's going to be on his ass. And that's what those guys were doing. That was I think it was that 2012, that crazy year that Tim Jennings had, where I think he had 10 interceptions and 2 touchdowns or something crazy like that. But it's because you're getting pressure up front. Those guys can be more aggressive. And when you look at the Bears back 4/back 5/back 6, depending on what defense that they're in, those guys are hungry. They're good players. And if you gave them just a little bit of a pass rush, you'd be able to see it. And we started to see it with Tyreek Stevenson last year. This is a guy that wants to play downhill. And you can't do that if you don't have a pass rush. So to me, one of the failings is that they haven't gotten the 3 technique. Also, this offensive line has questions. Like it has questions. Now, they addressed a little bit of it in the draft, and I'm glad they did, because I am not a believer in Braxton Jones. I think that you know what I'd love? I shouldn't say that. That's harsh. I would love it if Braxton Jones were the Bears swing tackle. I'd love that. I think that that's a high level starter caliber swing tackle, but you should be looking for someone better than that at the left tackle spot. I think right tackle's fine, but center is a problem. And what you'd love is to have a center who has a lot of experience so they can help Caleb acclimate to what the NFL is like. There were opportunities for the Bears to go make a move, and they kind of got the 4th or 5th rated free agent center to add to the mix. So I've got some questions about the trenches. And I'm not ordinarily that guy, but I am now. And we'll see what happens. But those are the types of things that you hope don't derail what I do think is, I think their defense is really good, even without a 3 technique. I expect them to do fun stuff. I love what they did at 9. I was afraid that they were going to move away from the idea of drafting a pass catcher at 9. I would have been good had it been Brock Bowers too, although they probably could have just traded down and still gotten him. But I love that now you've got problems. There's matchup problems for defenses when the Bears go 11 personnel. There's going to be a problem. And, we were joking about how you might see the Bears go 0-1 personnel now. They might feel comfortable doing that now. And that's exciting. Like, that's really exciting. Like, the wide receiver room has been completely elevated.
Yes.
Laurence, to caveat to your point,
was there?
Go ahead, Glenn.
No, screw Glenn. Ask your question.
No, go ahead.
Now, the caveat to your point, though, Laurence, that that's the thing that had us torn, because when you look at 9, and you're 100% spot on, a lot of us thought that Braxton would be a swing, and it's like, okay, if Alt or Fashanu is there, do you take Fashanu and give Caleb the 2 bookend tackles? You already got DJ Moore, you already got Keenan Allen, and again, I love Rome, but it's like when you look at the need in the proper development of Caleb, well, we know if Justin was back there, if he could masquerade, if that edge got around Braxton or got around right, whereas we know with Caleb, he's looking at all times, he's keeping his eyes down the field to throw the ball. He's not looking to run. So, what you just said was in alignment with what we've been thinking the entire time as to, okay, did we do enough on the offensive line in the trenches that wouldn't impact or affect Caleb's transition coming from, one read offense, shotgun out there with Lane, with his coach out there, would that stifle his development? Because in the past, like you said, when we look at Justin, when you look at Mitch, it's either been the offensive coordinator or not a good quarterback coach or not a good enough line or skill players that stifle the development of these guys, which caused us now within the last 5 years to be on our 3rd quarterback with the Bears.
Yeah, you want to try and maximize this, and you want to make sure that you have everything that you need. And we'll see. Like I think that Caleb's got some ability to mask some of your problems, and I think that he's got receivers that are going to help him out a ton. The only thing, like with Keenan Allen, it's pretty clear that Keenan Allen wants to and deserves to get paid, and that's why he's a Bear and not a Charger anymore. I don't know if you're going to be able to convince him, like, well, could you take a discount for us? If you need to take a discount for the Chargers, I don't know if he's going to take one for the Bears. So you had to get ready for what was going to happen once Keenan Allen walked out the door. And I think that bringing Rome in was a really, really smart move. And it's clear that he and Caleb have bonded. TJ Hushmanzada doing a great job getting Rome ready for the pros. Like, it's a good guy to learn from. So it's going to be fun. I think I'm hopeful that things are going to be really good, and this is a team that should be competitive. And that's, Glynn and I were talking about it last week on our draft show, that it seems like Ryan Poles pretty much, like, there's a lot of back padding going on last week at Hallis Hall. They kind of have that mission accomplished feeling that they've moved from the rebuilding part of this thing to now they're in the competitive window. My radio partner Layla Rahimi always talk. We call it the Rahimi doctrine, where the competitive window is defined. This is her definition. The competitive window is defined by the contract length of your best players. So if you look at it and you say Jalen Johnson, Montez Sweat, if those are your known knowns on your two best players, you look at their contract and the window should be opened up right now. And now it's a matter of what are the Bears going to do to try to walk through it.
Phil, to touch on your point with the offensive line.
You have to talk to Layla. Nice.
Will, do you think Caleb Williams' play is going to affect our offensive line dramatically? We already know his release is lightning quick, but if he can get better at taking what the defense gives him and work within the structure of the offense, do you expect to see a major difference in the play of guys like Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins? I think he can actually dramatically help them, and these guys can play a lot better than people expect.
It's going to be interesting because if, like I was saying about some of his weaknesses are the same as Justin's, I think it's for different reasons, though. If you look at how long Caleb would hold on to the ball, now I think that's because he was always thinking touchdown and check down. Plus, his offensive line wasn't great at USC, so there was Caleb. To me, is the thing that I wanted Justin to do. And now he's going to get an opportunity to learn from the guy that I'm talking about. I always liked about Russ is that Russ would run to open up windows to throw. Like, it's sure occasionally he would run vertically, but basically he was like, okay, let me just get outside the tackle box for a second. And look, there's Tyler Lockett. Fine. Now I'm going to get him the ball. And with Justin, it was kind of like, I'm not sure if the guy's open or not. I need time for him to uncover. Screw it, I'm running. I think Caleb is a little bit more of, I'm going to give Keenan Allen an opportunity to find the soft spot in the zone. I'm going to give DJ Moore an extra half a second to beat that guy because I know if they're even, his catch radius is good enough that he's going to make a play. It is going to be interesting to see how quickly Caleb calibrates and whether the speed of the NFL game is too much for him early on. Now, everything in his background suggests that even if it's too much for him early on, he'll recover and learn from it. Everything suggests that, but it's the old Mike Tyson statement. Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. How does he react when it doesn't go the way that he expects it to go? And Is he mentally tough enough for all of the things that are going to be thrown at him? I like his confidence. I like that there is, I mean, straight up and down, like I like that there's a level of arrogance to him. He thinks he's great. And I want the Bears quarterback to think that they're great. Like I really do. Just know that this is now a different thing. And you're going to be seeing defenses like Oregon's and Utah's and Notre Dame's pretty much every week. So you have to be ready for that.
I think you made the biggest point there was Caleb is looking to throw when he scrambles. He's not a guy who looks to run, where a lot of times Justin's highlight plays where, yes, he was great at escaping guys in the pocket, making defenders miss, but most of the time it would lead to him running. He got better at it last year, and that's something I think people admitted that he got better towards the end of the year. When he broke and scrambled, he would keep his eyes up a little bit more and look downfield. But that comes naturally to Caleb. That's something he's always doing. He's always looking to beat guys with his arms. He can beat them with his legs if needed, though. And that's why I think he can be special. And I think that's something Bears fans will learn early on.
I think it seems like the Bears are hoping that Caleb is more Joe Burrow than he is Justin Fields, where Joe Burrow was able to overcome, a bad offensive line when they went and they drafted Jamar Chase as opposed to getting that big offensive tackle, and they ended up getting to Super Bowl in that sense. They're hoping or banking on Caleb Williams being able to process the field quickly, and having these weapons around him and get the ball out, which, it's a big gamble. It's a huge gamble for sure. But I think that, if anyone can do it, I think that Caleb can do it with this team. Because not only does he have the weapons at wide receiver, we still have two great tight ends in Gerald Everett and Cole Kmet. Then we have DeAndre Swift, who I think is going to have a career year just because of all these weapons that are going to be on the field. We spread them out. And one thing we do know that this offensive line can do is run block. So we have a pretty nice running game. Shane he has to not get too cute. And Caleb can't get cute either. We have to get him to play within structure. But I absolutely agree with you guys. The game is won and lost in the trenches, and we didn't do enough there on either side of the ball. And it's disappointing, especially on the defensive side of the ball, when you hear Eric Washington come in and he's saying that, hey, we're going to try to establish the best pass rush in football, but we still have the same players. I mean, we drafted a guy in Austin Booker, but, he's more of a project than a difference maker or an impact player in his first year. So we'll see, I guess.
That's good, Samuel. Actually, I have a question for both of you guys. You said it. You brought up Austin Booker here. What do you guys think that Austin Booker brings to the table, and what have you seen on his tape that you can let Bears fans like us know that we're going to get? And also, where do you see him ending up at the end of the day in terms of his position on the defensive line? Is he a starter? Is he just more a situational pass rusher?
Glynn, this is your specialty.
I think it's the latter of what you said. I think he's more a situational pass rusher right now. He has to grow into his adult body, so to speak. He's about 6'4.5", 240 right now, and that's fine. I think if he's in the 3-4, he can get away with a little bit more. But in the 4-3 scheme like the Bears have, he's going to have to hold up at the point of attack and hold that edge a little bit better. And I don't think he's ready. I don't think his NFL strength is at that functionality just yet. He could probably stand weight-wise another 10 to 15 pounds. But I think right now his skill set says, he's at 12. Okay, but fantastic.
Yeah,
he needs a little bit more.
At his pro day, he was 252. So he's added 12
nice.
pounds somewhere in there.
Drink a lot of water.
With that added weight, he's still.
That was part of, the guy that you were sitting next to last week, Glenn. Like, that was the challenge for Alex his whole career. And still he ended up, fourth all-time in sacks?
Fourth.
Like, he was the one guy on that team that needed to gain weight on weigh-in day instead of lose it, which is always fascinating to me. And yet, and still, he was a really good run defender as a defensive end.
Right.
So you're hoping that he's got enough dog in him and that he's willing to scrap from that position so that he can succeed. Because you can be effective as a rotational guy, even if you're a little light. you can still be effective if you know what you're doing. So you got to be strong, like technique wise, and your athletic skills kind of have to be off the charts if you're going to be able to sustain a good career in the league.
Yeah, two things with that, and to co-sign with what Laurence is saying is that a lot of when you look at what Austin Booker's done, a lot of times he's in a stand-up position. So I want to see him better with his hand on the ground. I think at the NFL level, his technique has to be much more polished and refined. So that's an adjustment he's going to have to acclimate to, and I think he needs a little more time to do that. The other thing too is that I think what the Bears need more than anything else is that ability to be able to contain and get upfield, but not get too far upfield. And sometimes Booker, he kind of flies past, when he's trying to get the quarterback, he's so hyper-focused on that sometimes he kind of runs himself out of a situation where, a quick draw play or something else can, quick screen play, he kind of gives up that area. So a lot of what he has to learn is still at the NFL level. So I think right now, situationally, when you don't put too much on his plate, asking him to where, just focus on the quarterback or focus on this one area here as opposed to everything else assignment-wise that he may need to have in place to be a 3-down edge rusher. So right now, looking as more of a package guy. So 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 or longer, I think you'll see him out there. But his length is fantastic. His ability to string out a play is also good. I think he has a little bit more ability. I don't know how great he is in dropping back in coverage, but with his wingspan, and he has enough agility that he can drop back in short enough area to be at least somewhat of a distraction when it comes to shallow routes. But I like his upside a lot. It's just right now I don't see him as a 3-down edge rusher at this point.
He's a high motor guy, though. Never stops. Flus will love that. And he has, for how young he is, he has a nice bag of pass rush moves in his arsenal already. Really good with the long arm, really good spin move. And he actually has a little bit of a cross chop. So if we bring back Unique Ngakoue, we know he taught that to Gervon Dexter last year. So hey, you can teach that to Booker too. But hey, he's better at dropping in coverage than Justin Jones was. We'll tell you that much.
Now, all right, to be fair to Justin Jones, I know that last time that they asked him to do that, it didn't go well. But the game before that, when they asked him to do it, it worked. It worked more times than it didn't. It didn't work at the worst possible time.
Right.
Right. And that's the one that sticks in our mind.
Oh, yeah, they game against the Browns when David Njoku went about 40 yards?
Yeah. I was like, oh, look at that. He's just going right across the field.
And I think the Falcons ran it too.
Mm-hmm. We had it happen to us a couple times.
Yeah.
It was...
So they need to scrap that.
Well, get better personnel. We'll see what happens. But I think that, like you're saying, his athleticism is an upside. And I'm glad we went back into the draft to acquire him, because if the last pick was just the punter, I felt a little kind of sideways about that. I'm like, really? Like everything else we need, and we're going to end on this? So I'm glad the Bears went back into the draft to acquire Austin Booker, someone who I did have on my radar as a late round pick.
Now we got to get Lawrence's take on the punter, because that's been a hot topic too. I actually like the pick. I love it more after the draft rusher. But
hey man, if he's a weapon, he's a weapon.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. And a lot of times 4th round picks. Yes, we've had some good 4th round picks in history. We got Eddie Jackson, Nathan Vasher, some guys, Bernard Berrien in the past. But 4th round pick, the chances of them being a starter or a guy that's going to be a difference maker or a weapon, especially early on, if he lives up to the hype and can pin teams within their 10, 15-yard line and give Montez Sweat a chance to pin his ears back and make a play, hey, that's better for this defense. It's better for Flus, and it could help us get some much-needed wins.
Well, we know he's got enough practice. He's got enough reps.
Right.
He had one last year for the Hawkeyes.
Right. He was the MVP of that offense.
I mean, they have like T-shirts about him and stuff in Iowa City. So
Iowa was trying to get him in the Heisman running.
Right. I know everybody keeps calling him an offensive weapon, but isn't he a defensive weapon for us? See, this is how I look at it, though, and this is what I thought that this is me trying to overthink or try to get into the mind of a Brian Post right now. Is okay. there wasn't an impact player there on defense unless we went with like an Adisa Isaac, someone who was also an undersized defensive edge, because Braylon Trice went right before, right? That pick. So if there wasn't an impact player on defense, then get a player that can impact your defense, with this generational punter, a guy who has the leg strength and the hang time and the ball placement to pin teams back in the 10 and inside the 5, and then if you look at statistics on, the score punt rate from guys who get the ball inside the 10 and inside the 5, man, I'm pretty sure it's pretty high for punting. So, you help your defense out a lot if you get this guy and we're able to pin teams back consistently in games, and we get the ball right back. That's where I hoping that they were thinking, or that's the only way I can justify it in my mind is to say that he's a weapon that's going to help the defense, because we're going to be able to pin teams back. On that first down play, if you're pinned back, you're likely running the ball out of there, trying to run the ball out of there, and get into a passing situation, and we get off the field quickly. Hopefully, that's what I'm thinking and hoping that they were thinking, because other than that, I was scratching my head and pounding the table too, like, what the heck are we doing? So,
yeah. I mean, even Swift, when we came on that night, I told you flat out I was indifferent to the whole pick. Probably more so because Jonah Ellis went right after that.
Yeah, you were a Jonah Ellis fan.
I know.
Well, I think he could be a weapon on
if he's pinning these guys back, it gives Caleb a short field to work with as well. So
that as well, exactly. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Just to your question, Sambo, and to Will's point that he just made, I think what we're seeing here and what Poles, at least at this point, before we've played any games, I believe he's effectively done is build complementary football on all three phases, offensively, defensively, and now with the special teams. And to your question, does it help the defense more or the offense? I think it helps both. It helps the defense initially because, again, they can play with a better aggression, and it helps the offense indirectly because once the other team has to punt, let's say they don't have a punter as good as ours potentially, then it shifts the field position. And now Caleb, or the Bears offense, I should say, instead of having to go 70, 65 yards, maybe they're going 50, 45, 35 yards, or maybe not 35, but anywhere from 40 to 55 yards. And so you don't have to be as good as well offensively consistently down after down. You can be a big play offense. And now with the weapons that we have, DJ Moore, Doomsday, Keenan Allen, even the running back, you have guys, both running backs actually, you have guys with enough speed and enough pass route running acumen that these guys can maybe a big play, 10, 15, 20 yards. Next thing you know, now you're in scoring position. And it makes it a lot more difficult for other teams to contend with that because now they have to almost be on their heels and they have to play reflexively. And we can be the aggressors, which we haven't seen this team do offensively in quite some time.
In my lifetime, pretty much. And as Bears fans, we know firsthand how big of a factor special teams can be. This is the year Devin Hester's going into the Hall of Fame. So, Laurence, what are your expectations for the Chicago Bears this year?
I mean, there's a part of me that feels like it's unfair to expect that they're a playoff team with a rookie quarterback. I think that CJ Stroud's season last year was an outlier that might be making people crazy. But when you consider everything else, I don't expect them to contend for the division. And I do think that I think there is going to be some reality that's going to hit people in the face. You have to remember that this is not in a vacuum. Like when we're talking about the Bears getting better, they're clearly better, but that doesn't mean that Minnesota didn't get better. Green Bay didn't get better. Detroit didn't get better. So were the Bears able to get better enough to jump over those teams? Maybe. Maybe. It's unlikely, statistically speaking, but maybe they did. But I understand any Bear fan that goes, nah, fam, I've been waiting too long. They need to they need to do something right now. They need to be a playoff contender right now. While I do think like overall the concept is unfair, I understand why anyone would say that's enough. Be a team that's more than just at the bottom of the in the hunt graphic.
And that's where we want to be, I think. I think that's the goal. And if we can get there, I think Bears fans will be happy if Caleb Williams can win games. Even as a rookie, I think Ryan Poles has put him in the position to do so. I think we should. Some fans are going to get that punch in the face and our expectations tempered, but I think it's going to be less than they have in the past. Like, there's not going to be that Justin Fields in Cleveland game where I don't see us just getting absolutely embarrassed and not looking like an NFL offense. I'm hoping, knocking on wood, because I am a superstitious guy, I'm hoping those days are finally gone and we're going to look like a modern NFL offense. That's my hope.
Well, the caveat to what Laurence is saying, when you look at, okay, yeah, you want to have a half glass approach because, okay, we do have a fourth place schedule, but again, like Laurence said, but before the draft, it's like, okay, you see Washington, you see New England, you see Carolina, but all three of those teams, they improved dramatically. You know, the NFC West teams that we're playing, the 49ers, the Rams, the Cardinals. The Cardinals improved, hell, just with Marvin Harrison Jr. alone, and then the other pieces they added, they improved dramatically. And then within our division, it's like, okay, well, Green Bay, they added Edgerrin Cooper, which I wanted him with us, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. And then you look at the Lions, they got Christian Mahogany and some other guys that, hell, we scouted at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. And I'm like, those guys were dogs that would have been great depth pieces for the Bears, especially in the trenches. So it's like, you know, you kind of like tailor expectations because last year we was like, man, look, 12 wins should be the standard. And as we saw last year, you know, we blew 3 games that would have put us at 10. So it's like, well, now if we got a quarterback that comes in and doesn't turn the ball over and, you know, protects the defense and make plays when needed, like I can see 10 wins this year. But again, you know, you want to tailor expectations because we got to see how Caleb transitions to the NFL and how the pieces that we added on paper gel and how quick they gel. Because last year it took 4 games before we even started looking like an NFL franchise. And that was the game against the Commanders. The other 4 games were horrendous. So, you know, it's really hard. Like last year, really, it really put things in perspective and really made you sit back and say, hold up. You know, you can't think like a fan. You got to think realistically. You got to
folks are allowed to think like fans, but I just think that I know, like in my role, that I can't. I don't really have a lot of fan left in me because I covered the team, and it's weird. It's kind of like being like a doctor. Like you end up looking at it a little bit more clinically than emotionally. Right. The other thing is, man, I hate the last place schedule fallacy. Right. It only matters for 3 games. Everyone's playing the same schedule except for 3 games, and that's where it comes into play. But if you think that those teams, like, you need to look, like, did those teams get better? I think that's the smart way that you're going about it. Look at those teams that you're considering to be weak and go, did they also get better? And will the Bears be up to speed enough in what they want to do by the time that, you know, they play those teams? So it's a lot. Plus, like it's hard for me. My rule is this: I don't even want to talk about the schedule until teams make it out of training camp, because
injuries,
someone can get destroyed. If you know, like, look at all the teams that went into last season's training camp thinking that they had a fighting chance, and then you're like, nope. And then Joshua Dobbs is quarterbacking your team all of a sudden. So to me, like, you can look at the schedule and be like, oh, that's a win, that's a win, that's a win. Yeah. Let's see where the Bears are health-wise at camp after camp ends, and let's see where the other teams are. And then the first Labor Day weekend, we can start, you know, going, all right, these guys suck, and the Bears will get that win, and they'll get that win, and whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, the team was close to being playoff contenders last year, right? I mean, I never thought they were going to make the playoffs anyways, but there was a chance. Now we've gone ahead and we've upgraded, all our wide receivers. There isn't just DJ Moore anymore. You've gotten rid of the supposed problem in Justin Fields with an upgrade in Caleb Williams. So seeing in maybe a 9-10 win season isn't out of the realm of possibility. But like you were saying, have these other teams gotten better? Yes, they have. But have they gotten better?
Yes.
More so than we've gotten better.
The problem right now is the NFC North. They not only have they gotten better, it's just a killer division, killer play callers, killer talent all over. It's
people
it's
biting your
really
kneecaps. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Kneecap biting. You got cheese heads all over the place.
That's the key, Laurence. How do we break this Green Bay Packers curse? Because at this point, I think it's mental, and from a psychological, like in the last 60 games, we're 14-46. The last 20, we're 2-18.
Look, man, it's too late. Skynet has gone online and become, it's self-aware now. You had your opportunity, and then they messed around and looked up, and Jordan Love has a streak where he throws 22 touchdowns and 1 interception. And I think he's with – I personally think that he's with the smartest coach in the division. And you look at it and you go, oh, look, they got themselves another one of those type of dudes. Man, seriously, he just waited, and they were like, hey, can you play football? And he was like, sure, watch this. And they go into Dallas and kick them in the nuts. And I mean, it just seems like fated almost that Green Bay will figure out the quarterback position, and maybe, just maybe the Bears figured out the quarterback position this time. And if they did, then it gets fun and it can be competitive. But the Packers have proven that they're a really well-run organization, that while they find those quarterbacks, they kind of do a little bit of everything else to make sure that they're good enough to compete. And they were ecstatic about what they saw from Jordan Love, and they're going to try and build on that. And we'll see if there's a regression. But even in the games, I think it was the Oakland game last year, and he didn't play particularly well in that game. And I remember talking with Coach Wanstead, and I said, Coach, if I went back and watched the game, I went back and looked at the tape of it, and he made some throws where I was like, he's close. And if he figures it out, everyone's dead. Everyone's going to be in trouble. And then the next week was when he started on that run. You can see that he's got a lot of talent. You also see, I joke that he is unfortunately for Bears fans, he's an amalgam of Rodgers and Favre. He's kind of got the cool customer thing going on, like Aaron Rodgers, but he's also got a little bit of that Favre gunslinger, and that's what ended up losing them the playoff game to San Francisco, where he's like, oh, screw it. I'll just try to fit this ball in a window. Need to do it. But the fact that he's got both of those traits is scary. Is really scary.
I'm more scared of LaFleur than Jordan Love.
I think the other issue.
Fair enough.
Go ahead.
Well, to your point, Swifty, I think the other thing that we're not really I shouldn't say we're not factoring in, but we don't talk about as much, is the continuity with the coaching staffs in this division. LaFleur is not going anywhere. Kevin O'Connell's entrenched at this point. And obviously Dan Campbell as a head coach is entrenched in Detroit. So it's, we're still developing an identity. I think we're closer to who we're going to be than we've been before, but Detroit knows who they are. Green Bay has known who they've been for quite some time. We talk about the quarterbacks being understudies. Don't forget they did that at the receiver position just as long as they've been doing it at the quarterback position. So there's really been very little drop off at the receiver position as well. And then you look to Minnesota, where it's a little more disparate here and there, but the talent has been consistent. And now with the head coach in place, you talked about Joshua Dobbs. One of the teams he made a cameo for was Minnesota. And I think they actually either won a game or came close to winning one. But clearly O'Connell knows how to coach quarterback. And now he has two talent quarterbacks with which to do. And so there's more depth maybe at that position in this division too. So the NFC North, I think what Swifty was leading into, is a very complex, difficult position or division to navigate. and it mirrors what we've seen in the AFC North. So I think those two divisions are pretty much emblematic of the NFL in terms of these are the competitive teams that are out here, and going to a Super Bowl is going to go through those two divisions at some point in time. I know KC is KC, but KC still, barely won that game against the Ravens. And I think that AFC North and our NFC North are going to have a lot to say about the teams that are playing in the Super Bowls in the next 5 years.
Leave it to Glynn to bet against Patrick Mahomes. Boys, I got to run.
Yeah. Hey, Laurence, thank you so much for joining us, man. We appreciate you. You're welcome to come back anytime. And
Thanks
shout
Thanks
out
for
to
the
Laurence.
invite, guys. I appreciate the time. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right.
See you later.
Great. Appreciate you, Lawrence. Have a good one.
We appreciate you. Laurence Holmes, legend, 670 the score. We might have each other blocked on Twitter. We might have butted heads once or twice, but I love the guy, and that's what I try to tell people. Social media is not serious. That's the guy I would love to chop it up with anytime. Love Laurence Holmes. Guys, don't take Twitter seriously. But Glynn, now we get a chance to pick Glynn's brain a little bit here. And I had a couple comments that I starred because people had said earlier that I was like, ooh, these would be good questions for Glynn. Levante said a good one here, and I wanted to hear Glynn's thoughts on this because this is something I agreed with as well, because Laurence made the point about Caleb that we didn't see it a lot. I mean, he held the ball a lot last year, right? That's something he did a lot. And Levante's point here was go back and look at the 2022 tape when he had Jordan Addison. And this is something I came to after watching probably more Caleb Williams tape than I probably should have ever watched. But you get to a point where when you first watch all of his tape, you're going to be like, man, I didn't see him operate within, like he needs to, especially when you end with 2023 tape. You're going to have, he played too much hero ball stuck in your head because that's all he did in 2023. But then you go back and just look at the entire picture of things. And then, like Levante says, focus on 2022 when he had an NFL, a starting caliber receiver, a really talented guy. Not a knock on Brendan Rice or Taj Washington, but we saw where they got drafted. And NFL guys clearly don't think he's as good as a Jordan Addison or any of the three receivers that Caleb's going to have for the Bears. And he showed elite level anticipatory throwing back then. And he worked within the structure of the offense. So do you think, to me, it was Caleb in 2023 just tried to carry that team too much and just they played hero ball kind of by default. And I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue as most people think, because I don't think what we saw last year in 2023 is what we're getting in Caleb Williams. I think that was a guy trying to carry a team to a level that they didn't deserve to be at or weren't good enough to be at.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only question, or I shouldn't say question, but a bit of a concern, and it'll bear itself out over time, no pun intended, is how much of last year became a routine for Caleb, something that he now is part of his dynamic. Can he revert back to being the quarterback that would play more in time, or has he developed habits now because of how he had to play last year that are going to be counterproductive to what he's going to need to do as a rookie in the NFL? And we don't know. We won't know until we actually see it. Hopefully he'll play some preseason games so we get to see his development. I'll say this, though. I believe that, Caleb, I've said it before, he's a very self-aware young man. And I believe a lot of what he experienced last year, the adversity that he experienced, having to go through that, and even though he may have handled some things somewhat immaturely or reactionary in terms of the UCLA game or the Notre Dame game, I think those are things that in his mind he's learned from. He's spoken to those. He's spoken about that to some degree with the Bears, clearly. And also he's mentioned some of those things publicly too. And more importantly, aside from just the talent in terms of the athleticism that Poles has brought into his team, I think he's brought on, very mature and experienced guys who Caleb will be able to lean on as big brothers. And I think those big brothers will get him through those situations. So, yeah, when you go back to Levante's point, when you go back and you look at Caleb, you're seeing somebody that's playing more comfortably, somebody that can play within the system. And keep in mind, Caleb's benefited from the fact that he's played in the same system for 3 years. Okay, so if anybody can go off script like he did last year and still have some success in terms of the amount of yards he threw for. Keep in mind, the Notre Dame game, as much as that stands out in our mind, he only had 4 picks the whole season. I think 3 of those came in that game. Mm-hmm. So he is a caretaker of the ball when he's passing it. So I believe that we have a certain individual who has the ability to learn from the mistakes, take in the players, the system, the coaching that's around him, incorporate all of that so that he can be better, because I believe he's been doing that his whole entire life. So all he has to do is continue to be the consistent person that he's been, stay authentic to that, and I think he'll be fine. I think the team will be able to gravitate around him and also support him when he needs it, not just physically on the football field, but more importantly, psychologically.
More importantly, yeah, I agree with that. And I want to make a quick point about that Notre Dame defense. I mean, that's the game. That's, if you're a detractor of Caleb Williams, that's going to be the first game you bring up. And I think a lot of people don't know this, but Notre Dame had ran a ton of different defenses over the last few years. When they played Caleb Williams, that game, they ran a defense they had never ran before ever. They developed an entire game plan and used play calling and a scheme they hadn't used before. It was a different defense than Caleb had ever seen on tape. And that's something that Notre Dame didn't do for any other quarterback they've played in the last 3 or 4 years. They did that for one guy, Caleb Williams. They designed an entire game plan around this kid, and it worked. They beat him. But I mean, was Caleb expecting that? Was USC coaches expecting that? No. They were probably telling Caleb he's going to see exactly what they were going to see when they were looking at the Notre Dame tape from the last 2 or 3 weeks. They didn't expect Notre Dame to do that, and most teams in college don't expect guys to do stuff like that. So it was kind of a showcase of his talent and what level his skill is at and what teams are going to have to do to stop this guy. Defensive coordinators are already game planning for him. Believe you that.
It's an interesting point, Swifty. Because now that you're saying that, how much is it Caleb not being able to adapt to Notre Dame versus the rest of his team being unable to adapt?
Or even the coaches.
That's what I mean. They're included.
Coaching failure. It was more, it seems like what you're saying is that it was a coaching failure just as much as it was a failure on Caleb Williams' part. And I do believe in Caleb Williams, man. Like Glynn just said, man, I think he's extremely self-aware, and he might not listen to everything that's being said about him. He hears everything, and sometimes he responds to it, which tells me that I know that he hears everything and he reads everything, and he's very self-aware. So I was listening to an interview the other day from his quarterback coach where he said, that's something Caleb is really interested in doing this year, is playing within structure, and making sure he's anxious and we're itching to play within structure of an offense and not have to play hero ball so much. So I'm hoping like that's going to be the case here. We know that Shane Waldron is a competent offensive coordinator. If we were with last year's regime, then I would be a little bit more worried. But we went an offensive coordinator who's proven the ability to adjust and make in-game adjustments, man. And we haven't had that in the past. So hopefully, this helps Caleb Williams, and man, he develops a little bit faster than your average rookie quarterback. So my question was, I wanted to ask was really quickly, with history not being on the side of a rookie quarterback making the playoffs, we had 2 in the past 20 years. With last year is the most recent, and CJ Stroud, and everyone's banking on Caleb being the next CJ Stroud. And then I think before that it was Andrew Luck was the last one to do it before CJ Stroud. Should we be looking at history to say that expectations shouldn't be for Caleb to make the playoffs, because this isn't the average rookie quarterback situation. Let's just keep it real. Like, we have he's on a team that's not the worst team in the NFL. And typically, those rookie quarterbacks are coming into one of the worst teams in the league, and those teams don't have the weaponry that he's going to have. They don't have the defense that he's going to have, and the coaching staff that he's going to have even. So, what are your thoughts on that, Glenn? Should we be looking at history to say to define this team or the progress that this team could make this year?
I'd say you can. I mean, you talked about a couple guys you mentioned, but let's not forget Flacco was a first-round pick and went to the playoffs with the Ravens, and Matt Ryan was a first-round pick, same year, went to the playoffs with the Falcons. And we also saw Roethlisberger, who was a first-round pick who was supposed to sit behind Tommy Maddox. Maddox gets hurt, Roethlisberger takes over, and they go to the playoffs. So, but to your point, a lot of those teams, and the Falcons were a bit of an anomaly. More times than not, the rookie quarterbacks or the first-round rookie quarterbacks that go to the playoffs are usually drafted somewhere in the middle, and the team is a little bit better constituted in terms of, better players, be it on offense or defense. I think the Falcons were a little different because of the Michael Vick situation. So they had the talent there, but they were a high pick because they lost their quarterback. Same thing with Andrew Luck. Peyton had been taking that team to the playoff for years. He goes down, they kind of, shit the bed of themselves, but then they come back because there's still some talented players there. Andrew Luck's there. Weirdly enough, a more of an anomalous situation. The head coach couldn't coach because he had the cancer situation. And so Bruce Arians ended up taking over and being the coach that year and got rookie coach, or I think he got coach of the year. We're supposed to come to Chicago, and we blew that. But I digress. But looking at history, I think history shows that you can have a rookie quarterback, regardless of whether he's a first rounder or a mid rounder. RG3, first rounder, but the same year, Russell Wilson, third or fourth round, I believe, and took Seattle, and they beat RG3 in Washington. So, yeah, historically speaking, I think rookie quarterbacks can succeed. I think, again, more times than not, we focus so much on the quarterback and the players around them. I think we really need to pay more attention to, or as equal amount of attention to, the coordinators. Who are the coordinators? Not so much the head coaches, unless the head coach is also the de facto coordinator. How well do those coordinators coordinate? How well do they coach? Because that's how quickly your quarterback's going to be able to assimilate. He's got to be coached up to that point, right? It's what we don't see as fans. We don't see day-to-day training. How's his footwork? How are they correcting his footwork? How are they holding him accountable to the mistakes that he makes in practice? How are his teammates holding him accountable? How are the coaches able to incorporate the talents of the team with the talents of the person who's the trigger man? Last year I had such an issue with Getsy, and I'm glad he's not here with the new quarterback that we have. I had more of an issue with Getsy, not just Justin, but I didn't see anybody else develop. I didn't see Tyler Scott develop. I didn't see I saw Cole Kmet be confused half the season. I saw Darnell Mooney regress. I saw a lot of other skill position players. Well, I didn't see them. They weren't on the field. Robert Tonyan finally gets a chance to make a play. He hasn't played all year. He dropped the damn ball. He's like, "Oh, I'm open." He couldn't handle the happiness, So I really think we need to focus as much, or put as much energy behind who the coordinators are to answer your question in terms of, historically speaking, can we expect a rookie to succeed? Well, historically speaking, the rookies that did succeed, who were their coordinators? How well were they coached? And if that gives you a bit of a pattern or a footpath to answering more so, what do we expect from Caleb this year? Now, expectation-wise, this year, it's not just, we've talked about everybody else, but every now and again, we come back to Shane Waldron. Well, Shane Waldron so far has shown to be a flexible coordinator and one who's had success in the NFL. So I feel good about that. I can put some faith in the fact that here's a guy whose personality is malleable. Be like what Bruce Lee said. Be like water. Water takes the form of a cup when it's in the cup. Water does this, that, and the other. So that malleability, that flexibility will allow everyone else, not just the quarterback, but everyone else to develop, overcome whatever issues may be, impediments in front of them that prevents them from being the best player they can be. Also, can the coordinator put the players in position to understand and to succeed? Because part of that is being a great communicator. And the biggest part of communication is not what I'm saying to you. It's what I'm hearing you tell me, so that we can have a discourse, so that we can communicate better. They never teach you that in school. The subjects we go to school to learn are language, math, history, so on and so forth. There's never a class that teaches you how to listen. They just assume that's what you're going to do. And that assumption, as we all know, can make an ass out of you and me. So listening is a skill set. I believe that Waldron, if he's as flexible and malleable as he's been purported to be, is a person who listens, takes what he's being told to by his players, adjusts, makes that work, and there we go. There's a big reason why Kansas City Chiefs keep winning. Andy Reid is a hell of a communicator. He listens and makes adjustments. There's no way you can do that when you lead the league in most drop passes ever and you still win a Super Bowl, or at least in the season, you still win a Super Bowl. You got to be able to listen, got to be able to communicate. And I'm hoping that that's the type of infrastructure and culture that's being cultivated up there in Hallis Hall.
Interesting you said that, because we heard stories from last year about Getsy not listening to the players and them trying to get him like in game to make suggestions in game, and he just doesn't want to hear that anything from the players in game, which was crazy to me. And then you hear the opposite on the defense, where the defense was struggling, and then Blue started to listen to the players, and then they started to play a lot better. And going off of what you just said, and talking about the two de factos, offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, the de facto defensive coordinator in Eberflus, how are you feeling about him either progressing or regressing this next year? Because like we said, he didn't get that 3 tech that he needed, and there hasn't been any real new addition to this defense. So are you feeling good about this defense having more success next year, or are we thinking that there could be some regression now that there's a year of tape and film out there on this defense? How do you feel about them?
First off, I'll answer the last part first. I feel fantastic. I feel better about the defense. Maybe that's just being a part of Chicago and being a Bear fan, but I feel much better about the defense going forward than I do the offense, because we have some proof. Okay, there's some the availability of proof is there for us, and we, just as you mentioned, you saw Eberflus and that defense, was able to change and shift direction, and then once they added Montez Sweat, they got better. It's not easy to get somebody mid-season and then incorporate them to where you expect them not just to have success, but to probably supersede where you thought that you would have success. And they did that. They exceeded our expectations even more so, getting him in there, because it's hard to incorporate somebody. You got to figure out what he can do best. He has to learn his teammates, so on and so forth. So going into next season, I feel very strongly about our defense. It's not so much predicated on how many sacks you get. Time and time again, we've heard Eberflus say it. We've heard Lovie Smith say it. Anybody that's run that type of defense, it's about the pressure you generate. That pressure creates turnovers. That pressure creates opportunities for your defense to impose its will on the offense. And I think the Bears will still be good at doing that. Yeah, Gervon Dexter may not be your typical or prototypical 3 technique, but his size, his athleticism, he's able to impact the inside of the interior part of the line of scrimmage. He gives you that push. Plus, with his length, it cuts down, visibility for a quarterback, because he's such a long dude in the middle of the field. Montez Sweat's a long dude on the outside of the field. Austin Booker now is another lengthy guy on the outside. So as long as you can apply that pressure and contain them, you're going to create a situation where they have to hurry up. They have to pass over arms or around arms. You've got a long, lengthy middle linebacker or inside linebacker, or just he was a linebacker in Tremaine Edmonds. Another guy who's 6'5", 250 with length, and you have a ball hawking secondary that can feast on that. So I think you're going to see something very similar to what we saw last year. The second half of the season, the interceptions, grew exponentially, and that's because of the pressure, not so much the sacks, but the pressure that they were able to create. So I feel confident that they can recreate that. And Eberflus's history, you talked about history before, Eberflus as a defensive coordinator with the Colts did that time and time again, where they generated pressure. And I think the 4 years or so that he was a defensive coordinator for the Colts, they had no less than 14 interceptions in a season. We got that the first year, Eberflus year. We generated the least amount of pressure, I think, in the NFL. I think we had like 83, 84 pressures. We still got 14 picks Eberflus's first year. Last year, we got into the 120s, and we ended up being tied with 22 picks, and most of those came in the second half of the season. So I think with these guys being infused with the defense, where they don't have to think any longer, and we saw that switch You know, you could see it on the field if you're paying attention. It's like these guys, all of a sudden, it's like, boom, we don't have to think about it anymore. And they collectively like pivoted in a direction of like, we understand it, we get it now. So most of those guys are all back. They're still very young. And anybody that you add to that, they can catch up to, you know, they'll be brought to speed sooner and they can just be incorporated within that. So I think the defense will hit the ground running this year. The offense, everybody's got to learn a new system. Everybody's got to learn new players. Keenan's new at key positions. Keenan, Odunze, your quarterback, Swift. Those are key people in skill positions. And then your offensive line should have a little bit better synergy. But again, we don't know what the center's like yet. There's no proof yet of how good he can and can't. He is or may not be. Now, I'd like to believe he's better than the previous guy we have, and I joke about it with Will all the time. With this center, hopefully he's not making our quarterback be a center fielder or a shortstop, and that's a win for me right there. You know,
right? That's the first win, right?
But I do feel good about the defense. Yeah, no doubt. But I feel good about the defense going forward. I think Eberflus is smart enough and savvy enough. I think he's becoming NFL savvy in terms of how to survive. And I think he realized, you know what? I'm going to be calling the plays. I'm going to be like Andy Reid, but just on the defensive side. Yes, I have my defensive coordinator, and they'll help me throughout the week, and they'll learn, and they'll implement blah, 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 blah. Game time, that's my shit because that's how I kept my job. And damn it, Poles, you still ain't draft nobody for me on defense like I needed you to. And I've had a joke about that before where I said Poles probably kept Eberflus just out of guilt because he's like, man, I put you in a bad spot like 2 back-to-back years. Right. So, you know, it's like, oh, he's like, oh shit, I didn't get you another defensive guy. And so he went back into the draft and got him Austin Booker. And Eberflus looking at him like, really, dude, we're doing this again. So
think about it.
I think collectively. Say that one more time.
You hear me, Glenn? No, I was saying, listen to what you're saying is perfect. I said what you're saying is perfect because when I'm looking at it, we got Montez Sweat, and that's it. We got DeMarcus Walker, but when I'm looking at it, we still need another interior defensive lineman. And Keith Randolph, could he potentially fit that bill? Maybe, but I'm waiting to see some post June 1st cut. Sure. Dominique Robinson, is that project over with? I think that's a wraps, gentlemen.
I think so. Let's not forget Zach Pickens too.
I mean, Zach Pickens was probably playing out of position last year.
Yeah.
But I will say that I agree with everything Glynn just said, man. If we're going to make it to the playoffs, the strength of the team has to be the defense because it was the strength of the team last year. It has to continue to be the strength of the team this year. We haven't done enough to upgrade the defense. So Luke is going to have to be on top of his game, man. And I think they can do it, like he said, because, you know, those guys are going to play with a lot of pride. And then, you know, the younger players are going to develop. They have a year of experience underneath their belt, and they're going to get bigger and stronger as well. So hopefully, you know, the tide will turn and the defense can continue to play better. My only thing is, are they going to stay healthy and what the depth looks like on the defense? And like Will said, do you think that Holmes has at least one more move in him this offseason to either upgrade the offense or the defense? Maybe there's an offensive lineman, or maybe there's a defensive player that's a post-June cut, or even a training camp cut, or trade even, or even a guy that's out there on the trade market. Do you think that Holmes would make another move right now? And are you hearing anything about anyone that you would be interested in getting and adding to this team?
Last question first. No, I haven't heard of anyone at this point. I think it's still a little early. But Poles had mentioned, I believe, on AM 1000 today that, you know, there are still other ways to construct a team and add to that. And everything you just mentioned are things that he's going to look into, and everything you just mentioned are things he's already shown that he's done. So history has shown that. When he got here, he did that with Claypool, did it last year with Montez Sweat, and those are just the bigger name people. They're smaller, lesser known guys who he's done that with. And the NFL seems to be becoming more and more talent rich with these players that know how to play the game, have the athleticism to play the game, to where you see a lot of really good, you know, free agents sitting out there, you know, waiting for a team to call them. Mm-hmm. Some of these guys are like, okay, well, to these veterans, like, all right, I didn't make the team, but that's training camp. I have to worry about that. But my service is available near playoff time. And some of these guys are caught in Flacco, last year, just as an example. So I think that to answer your question, I think Poles probably has 2 or 3 moves that he's still going to do. I think the interior of the offensive line, or both lines actually, is an area he needs to address. And I also think a more accomplished edge rusher would be something that he will look into. And I'm not really sold on our backup quarterbacks. I know people really like Bagent, and I don't dislike him. I'm talking about in terms of experience and effectiveness. If you can upgrade any position, I mean, we upgraded from Caleb, from Fields to Caleb. I don't see any reason why we should hesitate on upgrading a backup quarterback. Brett Rippon ain't it to me, and I like Bagent, but he's still real young. I'm not saying that Caleb needs a veteran. I'm just saying I want a veteran because I feel like your times to win in the NFL, you never know when they are. And if we're having a really good season, let's say we start off, 12 games in, let's say we're something like 8-4. That's a little bit different now. Now you're like, no, we got a chance. We got 5 games left. We go 3-2. Now we're 12-5, or 11-6. Like, no, that might win a division, or at that point you want to have a really good backup, because if you don't and something happens to your quarterback,
you want that safety net.
It's going to feel like a wasted year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you don't want to waste a year. And so, back when we had Trubisky and it was 2018, and the Bears, won a division going away and blah blah blah. I felt that entire year. I'm like, oh, okay, we got, I don't want this to be a wasted year. And we never got close to that again under Nagy. We didn't. It's not like basketball or baseball to some degree. Football attrition really a lot of times dictates how long you can remain successful. Yeah, you want to have your structure in place, which is why I was a big proponent for structure, because you have to be able to weather the rigors of the NFL. It is a very physically demanding, merciless taskmaster at times. It can wreck a season. Just talk to the Cleveland Browns. I mean, dude, they went 11-6 last year and had 4 or 5 quarterbacks. There's no way you don't do that. There's no way you do that or accomplish that if you don't have the structure. Now, they lost Nick Chubb too. I mean, they lost Nick Chubb early. He's the best, one of the top 3 running backs in the league. That's your running game. That your running game. Your ability to run was him. You don't survive that if you don't have capable backups, solid offensive line, a quarterback who can do things so that they don't just bunch up and stop the run. So yeah, man, it's important that Poles can fortify as much as he can through however means he can throughout the season. He's done that before, I believe, with certain attempts. I think he gets better with it each time he's done it. And I think when you can become more, you can specify or you can narrow in more because you don't have as many concerns, then you can really hone those skills and really get who you need. Instead of trying to fill 5 needs, you're just trying to take care of 1 or 2.
100%. We got to give a shout out to Foster over there at BCP. I don't know if you saw this one, but Foster said he's talking live on BCP right now and repeating every word Glynn is saying so he sounds smart.
Uncle Bob.
Shout out to Foster over there.
Hey, I love Foster, bro. That's our guy.
And McFax, speaking facts. Hey, listen to Glynn. He knows football. And then a couple comments here that kind of went together here. Levante said, let's look towards next year's draft to add a defensive end or defensive tackle. And DDM said Gervon Dexter is going to take a big step forward this year. I think those could play hand in hand. Gervon Dexter's development could really be if he develops into the 1-2 punch that Eberflus wants, that kind of takes away our need at 3 tech or defensive end. It's not as high on the list at that point then, right? What are your thoughts on that? And Gervon Dexter.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'm a Gator hater because I went to Tennessee and I'm like, screw all things Florida. Once those guys leave, especially when they become Bears, I'm big fans of who they are as athletes, and then when you get to know them as people. And so shout out to Alex Brown. As much as I disagree with him, as a Florida Gator, we SEC brothers, and as a Bear, there's a connectivity there. But yeah, I think Dexter has shown the willingness to want to get better. I think he has that dogged mentality. I think he was misused, to be quite honest with you, when he was at Florida. And I think that added to him maybe not looking, his tape not looking as great, to where he was available for us to take him. It's hard to replace what he offers physically on the football field. He just needs to get the know-how. And I think with better talent around him, having Montez next to him, I think those things will help as well. As far as next year goes, I agree with, was it Levante? Yeah. I agree with Mr. Rogers in the sense that next year, there are, as much as this season, this draft, you saw, the first defensive player wasn't taken until pick 14. Yeah, ain't gonna be a problem next year. Next year, the first pick might be a defensive player. There are so many defensive talent. Yeah, it might be Pierce. Mm-hmm. James Pierce could be the dude, or Malik Williams out of Georgia is another cat as well. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I believe there'll be no less than 8 edge rushing type talents, defensive end edge rushers taken in next year's first round. As many as 10, but I think no less than 8. And so, yeah, we can find someone like that there. And there's all types of sizes too, man. There's some big dudes at defensive end coming out next year. There's this cat out of what was the school? I think it was Arkansas, Landon Jackson.
Oh, Landon Jackson.
And this dude's like 6'7", 280.
Oh, he was coming out.
Yeah. All right. I was just the size alone, I was like, wow, okay. Then I started watching. I was like, okay, he gets after it. Yeah, okay, plays and run well. Okay, he lengthy. Okay, I get it. Then I said, whoa, where did you find that? I said, he almost picked the ball off in the middle of the field. I said, that had to be about 10, 15 yards deep. Sure enough, I go back. This dude is backpedaling. And then he sees where the quarterback is looking. And then he, with anticipation, moves in that direction. And the only reason why he dropped it is because he's probably defensive end and got good hands. But the fact that he was even there was mind-blowing. I'm like, nobody that fast should be able to move that agile backwards and then laterally during a play. It's like, wow. So someone like that, if that dude's here, like if we took him this year, that Eberflus stuff he was doing last year in the game against the Browns, it should might actually work. But there's talented guys like him. They're talented guys like him coming out. Yeah. Yep.
Next year's defensive draft, it's kind of like this year was. This year we broke the record with most offensive players ever in the first round of a draft. And I'm not saying we're going to break the record next year, but it flip-flops. This was an extremely offensive-heavy draft.
Yep.
Next year it's going to be extremely defensive-heavy. So no matter where we pick in the first round, we should be able to get a quality defensive player, just like the teams this year that were able to set there at the end of the first round. And like the Bills, even trade down a couple times, still land a wide receiver because there was so much talent on the board. Right. We could do the same thing next year at defensive line. If we're not set on one specific position or guy, we could take advantage of that as well.
Right.
One thing we're not talking about either is the addition of Eric Washington to the team itself. I mean, yes, we're bringing up players, but it starts at the top. And that's one thing we didn't have last year. Yes, we had Matt Eberflus calling the plays and all that, but now he's going to have another mind to bounce ideas off of. And we saw what Washington did in Buffalo, too.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And as much as Matt Eberflus loves talking about the 3-tech and it's the key of his defense, Matt Eberflus is a linebacker guy. Eric Washington is a defensive line specialist. If anyone's going to come in and get more out of Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens, I think Eric Washington is that guy. And I think that's one of the reasons it's a very underrated hire. And he's a guy who could also take over play calling and let Flus kind of just step back into a overseeing the whole team role. And I know, Glenn, I did want to disagree with you on one thing earlier, not a major thing, but that Flus was unhappy with this. I felt like Flus was so elated and happy that we got Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. Like when he got on the phone with Rome, he called him my guy. Like he told Caleb, it was kind of awkward. Like honestly, I don't know if you guys saw this.
I love you.
Did you see Flus when he's like, "All right, I love you, Caleb."
Yeah,
Caleb's like,
"Okay, man."
But like he looked, I think it kind of feels like he's taken a step away from the defense and more of an ownership of the whole team. And I think as a defensive guy too, I know we did blow some leads last year, and everything wasn't perfect on defense, but I think Flus wants more firepower on offense because he knows that'll help him win games. And he's like, look, if this offense can score, that's what it's all about. It's not all about the defense.
And
no doubt. I don't have no problem.
And let's be honest.
I was going to say with Flus, I agree that as far as the first 2 picks that were taken, yeah, I think he was all for that. I think when the draft ended after the punter is when he looked side-eyed, like, dude, really? Like, he's not going to give me anything this year? Like, give me something.
Hey, Flus is the one, out of everyone that talked about Tory Taylor, Flus is the one who in his very first sentence about Tory Taylor called him a weapon. I think that might have been a Flus guy too. He's like, look, because Flus is a defensive guy, and Flus is like, look, last year a lot of those leads we blown, or we blew these leads. We lost some games late. He's like, look, if those teams would have been pinned inside the 15-yard line and Montez Sweat, because he did it. There was that one game you remember. I watched so much tape, so much college tape after the season ended. I don't even remember what game it was, but there was a game where Montez Sweat got a sack. I think it was against the Lions, like back inside the 15-yard line. And it was a key sack, might have even been a fumble. And it was those kind of plays are game changers. And if we got a punter that can do that, and if we could even get one safety this year, just one. When was the last time we had one of those? Back with Adewale. I remember Adewale and Alex Brown getting a few, but we haven't had one in a while. So if we can get something like that, I think that was a Flus pick, honestly. I honestly do think that was a Flus pick. I don't know why, but I just felt I know it was, hey, that's going to make our special teams coordinator super happy. But hey, Flus liked it. Flus called him a weapon.
Yeah, the other thing that's going to help our defense is playing with a lead too. Like, we didn't play with many leads, man. And when we have a lead, that makes teams one-dimensional, and we're great against the pass. It's when we have to defend and guess, run passes. But, we struggled with early on last year. We kind of figured it out as the season went along. But, man, if we're playing with a league, this defense is dominant, in those situations. So I expect the defense to play a lot better next year with a league, because you have more opportunities to rush the passer, which is going to give you more opportunities to generate those turnovers. So, hey, so it's playing complementary football is what it looks like, man. And that's why we got special teams on board now too. So, hey, man, it could, if everything works out the way that it should, then we could be a really great team, and not just a one-sided team as we've been in the past.
And I think and not that you were wrong about Flus, Glynn. That's not what I meant. I just think I think he's evolving. I think he's going from becoming a pure defensive guy to a guy that sees the whole team. And I think that's something that most defensive guys and coaches that were coordinators first, a lot of them they struggle with that. And there's going to be a transition period for almost all of them. But it almost feels like Flus is transcending into that. And it started even last year, I'd say, when he was, I believe he was really in on Darnell Wright. And he was even in training camp and stuff, he was always talking to Darnell Wright, like dapping him up, just like he did with Brisker the year before. And I was like, he really liked this guy. This was a guy that Flus wanted on this team. So I think I know a lot of people talking about Flus is on the hot seat, but I think Flus is a guy who is growing on me a lot, especially with the beard. We haven't seen, you guys wait until bearded Flus gets a hold of this offense and gets out there this year. Okay.
I mean, the thing about Flus was they had to do some growing up real fast with the Alan Williams situation. And I don't think we talk about it enough. The man can lead men. That team could have folded like the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl, but they didn't. I mean, it wasn't the year we wanted, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse. And I have to give him a lot of credit for that.
True. Right. Yeah, and I think if you listen to the interview on A1000 today.
Go ahead, Will.
No, I was asking Glynn, who are the 3 guys that he picking right now that's on the bubble? Because I got my 3
on the bubble.
I think that
we know you're going to say Larry
already. He doing that already. He said they got to go.
On the Bears bubble.
He's been trying to cut Larry
look,
Moore.
I'm evolved for life.
Ooh.
He has been. I'm evolved for life, but I still try to understand what kind of pictures Velus Jones has on polls and why, what he knows that we don't know, because I don't.
Hey.
I can't see. I don't understand why he's
Sleeping on him, man. That new kick return game.
The new kick return rule, baby. I'm telling you, Baylor's gonna take at least 3 to the house. At least 3.
Hey, that was a fumble 4 that go into the other way. just don't fumble the 4 that go into the
I'm throwing a flag on that one.
Talk about the
fumbles. That's unnecessary roughness. That's unnecessary roughness against a fellow volunteer like yourself, man. That's 15-yard penalty.
Hey, you can't talk about my family, but I can. So that's how I look at it.
I hear you. I like that.
McPack asked a question down here. He said, let Glynn discuss the fact that defense struggled against the pass because of the lack of pressure. Yeah, I mean, Montez made things better, but I think we discussed that a little bit. My bad. That was something we kind of touched on a little bit already.
Yeah, no, I think the pressure, it definitely, the increase happened once Montez got here, and not only that, but Dexter also came a little bit alive towards the latter part of the season too, and you saw that pressure be generated more so, and you saw some pick in the defense. And look, James Johnson would be very happy because he got a big contract. He kept getting opportunities to pick off the pass. He dropped a couple, but because that back end of the season, that pressure mounted, he was able to have a good enough a season to where he could secure those interceptions to get him the payday that he got. And I love that Boss Hawkins secondary with Brisker, Gordon, even Terrell Smith late in the season was making plays, and you saw that. And he's going to push Tyreek Stevenson to do the same as well. So yeah, man, they're going forward. But to Will's question, Velus, he's Borum in my head now, so I've got Larry Borum being on that, and I think I think I don't know if the hot seat is the word for it, but I don't think we're keeping 3 quarterbacks. And I don't know if Reppin is putting pressure on Bajan or Bajan is going to make Reppin expendable. But I think that battle that you're going to see for the second quarterback position is something that we'll see play out in the preseason more so than what's being talked about right now.
Oh, really? I would see it. I kind of see Bajan as a lock. Like, he's a guy who proved last year that he's capable of winning a game if your starter gets hurt, and that's all most teams want out of their backup, is a guy who can come in and play at least 500 ball if your starter's to miss a couple games. Keep your team competitive. Don't sink the ship. And that's something Bajan proved last year, even on a team with a lot less talent, that he could do that. So I think he's pretty set as the backup unless they want a stable veteran that comes available like a Ryan Tannehill or something. But I would actually say that it's the QB3 spot. It's Brett Rippon is going to be pushed by, and now his name just slipped my head. Austin Reed, the kid from Western Kentucky that threw to Malachi Corley. I think he's got some upside, man. But the guy I think that was left out there, Travis Homer, I think probably going to lose his spot on the roster. I don't see us having a special team spot.
He's still on the team? I'm sorry. I already discounted him.
Glynn, come on. I'm looking at Travis Homer, Dominique Robinson, and Larry Bourne. Pack your bags, baby.
D-Rob has a shot. I would say this is D-Rob. It's his training camp. He's going to be here for camp. And what he does in camp, his camp is important. If he doesn't come out and get a couple sacks in preseason and fly around and look much improved in camp, then he's gone. But they're not going to – they've kept him around for 2 years. They cut Terrell Lewis and Trevis Gibson to keep him last year. There's no way they don't give him, after having this entire offseason to improve and letting Eric Washington work with him, they're going to at least see what Dominique Robinson has in camp. So that's one guy I know it's in my comments all the time. People are like, is D-Rob gone? D-Rob's gone. It's like, not yet. Because right now it's Montez Sweat, it's DeMarcus Walker, Austin Booker. That's all we have at defensive end, and we theoretically we need the 4. Dominique Robinson right now is still on the team, and he has a chance to improve. Can he get beat out? Can we sign a vet that's going to take his spot? Yes, it's probably very likely, but I would say he's here through training camp to at least show what he's improved upon.
And don't
Unless
forget
they decide to
Khalil
sign
Kareem.
someone else for that money, man, because he counting for $2.5 million against the cap.
D-Rob is?
Yeah, which is
Oh, that's
crazy
more
to
than
me
I thought.
too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, a lot more than I thought.
2.5?
Going back to the backup quarterback, I think we undervaluing.
Changed my mind.
You had a great point in saying what you did about Tyson Bagent last year. He's proven the ability to come in the game and get you a win in 2 out of 4 games. I mean, he's proven that ability, but he hasn't seen everything that a Ryan Tannehill has seen in the NFL to be able to assist a Caleb Williams who's trying to get up to speed as fast as he can. So it'd be that extra coach in his ear as a player coach or whatever. So that's where I think the value of adding a guy like a Ryan Tannehill to this team is invaluable for Caleb Williams, man, because this other guy, was it Brett Rippon? We don't know, man. How much football has that guy actually played, and to say that he can actually help a Caleb Williams' maturation process. So I would love for the
bloodlines, man. Bloodlines.
Hey, man,
He's
through
related to Mark
osmosis,
Rippon.
I guess we can learn through osmosis too. Then now, right? So I mean,
That's how I got through most of my school days.
I hear you.
I have to ask though. Glynn, do you think I think that might be overrated, the fact of bringing in their quarterback. Caleb's had guys in his ears teaching him how to be a pro. His dad's been teaching him, and he's been dealing with NIL money since he was very young age. And then now he has on this offensive staff alone Shane Waldron, Kerry Joseph, and Thomas Brown, who are going to be in his ear all the time. What do you think is a value? Let me rephrase this. What kind of value do you think a guy like Ryan Tannehill, Tannehill, yes, he's been in the NFL. He could teach him about living in the NFL, handling the expectations, but what is he going to teach him about playing quarterback that the coaches can't do and that Caleb doesn't know already? Because I think it's overrated.
How to duck live bullets. I don't agree that's totally overrated, but there are times where the coaches are coaches, but the players, they experience it different. They experience the live action of it differently. And how do you account for that? You can't tell, the coach can tell you what he wants you to execute, but how you execute and go about doing that therein lay where an experienced vet could be like, dude, you're going about this the wrong way. You got to talk to him like this. Sometimes you have to not listen to the coaches. You got to be the player. Now, sometimes it comes across, I hear it better from you than I do from the coach. There's a certain amount of deference you're going to allot for the coach telling you something, as opposed to my boys telling me something, or my guy, or someone who's like my uncle's telling me, or whatever mentorship aspect. That the connectivity is because we're players, and you do it on the field. I know you know what I'm experiencing because you've been hit, by 6'4", 320. Mm-hmm. Coaches like telling me do this. That's not shit, man. Like Justin needed somebody to be like, dude, like F what the coaches are telling you, get the hell out of there, or whatever the case might be. So I think it comes from a true live real life experience in the immediacy of the situation, as opposed to a coaching situation where it's theoretical, it's on the board. And even if your coaches played before, there's been some time between when the coaches played and you played. And that might be why some of the coaches in Detroit, they've done so much better cohesively, because a lot of those coaches were former players. And so they're teaching it differently than just how somebody like Getsy might be teaching it. I'm not trying to pick on Getsy. I'm just using somebody that wasn't a pro. So I think that's where the value comes in having a Tannehill like that.
Vizo Joe, I don't know if I said it right here, but he makes a great point. He says, I remember reading this now, I didn't remember it beforehand, but Tannehill didn't even want to help Malik Willis when they drafted him a couple years ago. I remember they asked him about that famously, and he said something about, I'm not here to help Malik, I'm here to do my own thing. And that's why I think it's a different scenarios when quarterbacks get drafted. Like if we had an Alex Smith already starting on the roster, a guy who was our starter last year, who was a vet, who was over 30, and just hadn't got the job done for us. Like, let's say if Andy Dalton had been our starter the last 3 or 4 years or something, I think it'd be perfectly fine to keep him on the roster and let Caleb learn from. But when you're bringing in a guy from outside that already, according to reports, he isn't a guy who wanted to mentor anyone a year or two ago. Maybe he's had a change of heart, but does Caleb even want a guy like that in here? Because that's a guy, Caleb, we have a backup quarterback. I just don't think it's that realistic. And I think a lot of fans overrate this, because what if Tannehill comes in, he's also going to be learning, and he's also going to be competing for a job. How much time and effort is he even going to put into helping Caleb Williams? See?
Well, I get what you're saying, and I think the situation, it's situational. The one you gave with Tannehill not helping Malik Washington, it was Tannehill's team. So you coming in and taking my job, I got a different viewpoint. I'm looking at it differently. I don't have a job, and in order for me to get a job, they told me I need to teach you how to do your job. So my job is teaching you how to do your job. I might come in with a different mindset, and so that has something to do with it. And Tannehill, I was just using him as a person. It could be somebody else who's experienced. It's, hell, it could be Flacco for whoever.
Oh, yeah.
I think Aaron Rodgers was that same way.
Yep.
Right. I think Aaron Rodgers was that same way initially in Green Bay, but then in New York, he was, Zach Wilson's best uncle. So I think when situations change, I think, the adult in a room makes the adult decision. And if not, then another adult will make the decision about taking that immature person who's pretending to be an adult and moving them out. So, but I think the value, whether it's Tannehill, but just that particular veteran quarterback, I was speaking to that aspect. I don't think that's necessarily as overrated, because it's again, we've seen it proven throughout. And I think there's a value to that. We've seen it many times. There's coaches in the locker, guys that kept. It could be a catcher on the baseball team. He's a third catcher. Why is he kept? Because he's mentoring the other guys. Because there's nuances to catching that the coaches either forgot, or they don't really know that position, or they don't really know it because they haven't lived it like I've lived it, and I'm currently living it, so I can share with you, and we can talk about that. We can go get beers together. I can't go get beers with the coach because it's going to look differently. You can't have a Dick and Flutie situation again. We invite them to the house and you chilling. You gotta keep that separation between the coach and the player, and so having that coach-like mentality who is a player can be beneficial. That's why a lot of times you have the head coach, you got the offensive coordinator, you got the quarterback coach. But sometimes you need that other person to kind of bridge just that aspect of it. So I think that backup veteran quarterback for a rookie doesn't have to be, but it can be invaluable, or at least, if not invaluable, at least it has some value to it.
I definitely agreed, because you always talk about it like you're going to learn more from the guy in the foxhole with you taking the shots than somebody 6 miles in the rear.
100%, 100%. And I got to talk about real quick Caleb Williams' reaction. I know you.
When you see all the things that come with Caleb,
you've seen the screen. We'll do it one more.
When you see all the things that.
I mean, I've never seen anyone that happy to be a Bear in my life. Like that's the level of excitement that's bringing to the table. That, hey, that's where I'm at right now. That's how I feel just walking around every day. So that's what I gotta say.
And I will say that his personality is so jaded than everybody was saying it was. Man, I'm just happy.
Why you jaded?
I'm a little jaded. I think he's happy. I think he's happy being the first pick. I think if it was whoever the team was, he would have been screaming like that, because that was a goal. And I say jaded. I don't know if that was all for Chicago, but I think authentically, I think it was him because of what he wanted to do manifested itself. He wanted to be the first pick in the draft. That happened. He wanted to win a Heisman. That happened. They win a national championship. They win a Pac-12 or conference championship. But damn, you 3 for 4 at this point. It's pretty damn good, And then hear your name called, it was like, it's like, I'm here, baby, like whoa, whatever. So I think it came from that. I don't know if it came from being a Bear as much as it came from this is the team that took me, and I'm pumped and let's go. And now everything after this it is so bear centric now, because now it's relief. I can talk about it. I can be about it. I ain't got to hold back no more. Let's go. And I think that's what I caught in that scream right there.
I loved it, man. I couldn't be more excited about the season. You guys have any final questions for Glynn or anything else before we go? I know before we go, though, we are going to do we're exiting. I thought of something cool here. We're all doing the bear claw together before we go out here. Okay. So just know that's coming. So anybody have any final questions for Glynn?
Nah, just I guess we could just talk about Caleb's personality, man. And why was there so much said about his personality being so much different, just the exact opposite what it seems like that, everyone we were hearing before we actually got to know the kid, man. Like, where does all that come from, man? I mean, you were in the media world, and it's just crazy to me that he seems like the exact opposite of what was being said about him, as far as the personality and the character of the person.
I actually don't think it was the media in of itself so much as it was reported by the media about so many other, external people outside talking about it, people on social media like us, fans. And here in the Midwest, sometimes things are regional, bros. I mean, like in the Midwest, there's a lot of core values. There's a lot of very directness that we have. We expect things to be, not bland, but to form. It's like, you go down south, it's a little bit laid back in some respects. There's more cordiality, so to speak. You go out east, everything seems to be a little bit sped up. You go to the Southwest, it's a different kind of vibe. You go out west, it's a totally eccentric kind of vibe. And so when you're in the Midwest and you have these quote unquote Midwestern values, someone that seems as eccentric as Caleb did rubs you the wrong way before he says hello. And it's like, hold on, how dare you play a football sport like football, you lose and you off talking to your mom, you're not in the locker room, and you're not doing an interview, and you got a towel and you crying like you just lost a national championship in basketball. That's basketball. That ain't football. What you doing? Like, no, you with your moms? What? It rubs you the wrong way. And then you hear about the fingernails. What? Dude, you pay? Come on, man. It's like it just rubs you the way. And so then it becomes a narrative. And then you see a guy who seems unapologetic, because I was talking earlier with some people, even my wife, we had this conversation where this generation of people, the youth that are our generation now, they're so unapologetically audacious. It's like, no, why am I going to wait 5 years? No, I can do this now. Nope, I don't have to wait. I can get my phone out and I'm going to call and get this now. Wait, why are you doing it that way? It's too slow. And it's the audacity of youth. And so you saw a person who was unapologetically audacious. And here in the Midwest, it's like, whoa, hold on, that's a process. You how you gonna do? And we're just not used to that. And so I think that preceded him before we got a chance to actually hear him. And I think that's why this medium that we're all on right now, social media, it can be a boon or a bane. It can be toxic or it can be, informational. And it can be, something that gives us more and better insight. And so seeing Caleb on a show like The Pivot gave people more insight to who he was. Being able to control your narrative, because you have a platform now that you can create and people listen to, it's so important, so that we begin to judge you or experience. I shouldn't say judge, because I think that's wrong, but we get to experience you more as who you are and how you are, and that relatability helps. We look at the young lady that the Sky just drafted, Bayou Bambi. Bayou Barbie. Excuse me. Her name's escaping me right now. Angel Reese.
Yeah.
You look at her and how much she talked about all the negativity she got, because she's just being who she is. But within that, she found strength, and we hear that because she's telling us this, because she can do it through social media. Now, some of the media is getting her some attention too, no doubt, but she realized it's important for her to maintain, because so many other people look to her and react to her, who are younger girls, younger versions of her from all different walks of life. And so it's important to have something to help control your narrative. And so now people can be more ingratiated to who she is as a person, because you learn more about her. Same thing with Caitlin, the young Iowa superstar who was the first pick in the draft. Caitlin Clark. We get to hear her a little bit more as opposed to everyone else naysaying her for whatever the reasons might be. So to answer your question, I think haters gonna hate, and that's just how it's always been. But I think for the most part, people like ourselves, we take a beat, we listen. We may have our opinions early on, but they're not etched in stone. And then we realize, okay, I was wrong, or I misunderstood, or I was misinformed. Now I got it. Okay, cool. Let's go forward. And I think that's why what we do here, and people who may mirror the kind of things that we do, it's important that you get to see that, and so we get to be able to understand the people, not just comment on the athletes and how they're making our enjoyment better or not. It's like, no, they're still people. They're humans, and they go ups and downs, and that's a part of life. Keeping in some kind of perspective, and that's why I enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and I think we all do, because we're able to bring some perspective, hear other perspectives, be open to that, and we can all grow from it.
Well said, Glenn. Yeah, because you got to remember, nothing is absolute, and new evidence is always going to present itself. And I think more people need to take that to heart.
100%. And you said it.
Oh no, I'm absolutely right all the time. Don't forget that.
I know.
Glenn's never been wrong, guys.
First time you say it. First time.
No, just joking.
And I think the key of it is we have a general manager in charge of our team now, a guy running the show that we should all trust. And I think as fans, I know over the past, my whole lifetime, and for the guys, I know a lot of people in the chat, even older, a lot longer, they haven't been able to trust the general manager. So it leads you to criticize every move they make. And I think we're finally in a position now where we can set back. There's no need to criticize every move because this guy's smarter than us. And as fans, Bears fans been one of the few teams out there where a lot of us can legit say, hey, if I was running this team the past 20 years, they probably would have been better. Ryan Poles is here now, and that cycle is over. Those days are gone. We have a great GM now. So everyone at home in their mom's basement wouldn't have made better picks than Ryan Poles would have. He killed this draft, and he's killed this rebuild. So as fans, we need to just trust him now, and we need to come together as a fan base because we're about to start winning a bunch of games, and it's going to be fun to be a Bears fan like it never has been before, at least in my lifetime, because I miss the 84 Bears, but 85.
Say Swifty, and as I like to say, man, this just looks different, man, than the past two GMs. We saw the mistakes that they made, and the impact that it had on the team in their present moment and in its future, and everything that Ryan Poles is doing is a lot different than what we've seen in the past. So that's why I choose to be optimistic about what he's done, man. Has he been perfect? No, he's made a few mistakes, and he hasn't let them define him, man. Like a lot of people like to talk about the Claypool. What about Claypool? He moved on from Claypool. We would have doubled down on that mistake if it were, a Phil Emery or a pace guy. We were making a lot of mistakes then, and I just see a huge difference now, even in signing players and the contract situation. So I'm choosing to be optimistic because it looks different than it did to me in the past.
And we got Romo Dunze now, who's the anti Chase Claypool. We got our wide receiver now, and then we did have a couple people ask not only when Glynn would be back, and he's welcome and can be on every single week, but they also want to know where's Glynn's podcast at. And I threw it up here. If you guys haven't heard it before, Easy Smoke in the GM podcast. This is a podcast Glynn does on his own. You can find it on all the places that do podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify. And I see he's on YouTube now as well, Glynn. I just subbed to you. I just seen that on YouTube there. Good to see you guys on there, even without the GM.
Appreciate that.
Got that audio up there.
Got the audio. Thank you, man. Sir. I appreciate that. Thanks for the shout out.
Well, I love it. Hey, bear down, guys. Glynn, as always, you can come on every week. Just let us know when you want to be on, and you're always welcome here. And we're doing the bear claw, guys.
Appreciate
First up, squat up, bear down, and then let me see your claws, guys. Come on.
Yeah, get the.
Your mean face.
There it is.
Use your mean.
We clawed up.
Use your mean.
Yeah.
Let me see. All right.
Yeah, is that what?
Am I in there?
Well,
There it is.
there it is,
Yeah.
guys. Hey, bear claws in the chat, guys. We're out of here.
Yeah, I'm struggling here. There we go. There we go. Yeah.